Man, I'm telling you guys, if there was any day that I wish I had Tom Cruise's power that he has in this movie, it would be today as of the recording of this video. Because, I just had one of the most troubling days at work, and if I could just do it all over again and perfectly this time, I would get a raise. Hey everyone, Davey here, back again with another movie review, and this time I'm trying out the new sweet high-definition cameras. I'm still geeking out about that, sorry, but this is my first movie review on said camera, and it is for Tom Cruise's new vehicle, Edge of Tomorrow. And Edge of Tomorrow stars Cruise as Private Cage, who is sent into battle against aliens, because if we're going to send anybody to go up against aliens, it's going to be Tom Cruise. He's done it before, he will do it again. And when he gets thrust into battle, he dies. And that's it. Movie's over. Sorry. Spoilers. Or is it? The twist is that when he dies, he wakes up at the beginning of the day when he's barely getting on the ship to begin training, and it repeats itself over and over and over again. And it is up to him to figure out why this is happening to him and how he can use it to his advantage to win the war against the invasive race. Now, a lot of people have said already that this movie is a combination of Groundhog Day with Bill Murray with any science fiction movie that has been out in the past few years. Particularly Elysium, because of the way that the mech suits work in this movie are similar to the one that Matt Damon wore in that movie. It just reminded me an awful lot of that one. But it's a very good combination, and they made it work, because that's one of my favorite things about this movie, is that the science fiction behind it is solid and firm. It's obvious that not only the writers and the producers are huge fans of science fiction, so they made sure to make a movie that paid attention to that science fiction and respected the rules, respected some of the mythology behind it, and just stuck with that. And it made it feel to me like I was watching an anime, and I believe this is based on a book that was written by a Japanese author. So there's some inspiration from various anime within this story. And people who are huge fans of anime are going to watch this movie and be like, oh hey, that reminds me of that, and that reminds me of that, and they're going to be able to pick this movie apart and tell where it got its inspiration from. It explains the right amount of that science fiction without overdoing it, and they let you put certain things together. Like, for example, they're not going to show every single day that he lives over and over again. There's moments where he says, hey, we already did this, and you're right, you're not going to be able to fit all of this within a 2-hour movie, so they go ahead and they cut out some of the excess to let you put things together and be like, oh, he obviously just did that. Now, that doesn't explain certain things, like, for example, him knowing certain things about other people, and that's how he convinces them that, hey, look, this stuff is happening to me. I mean, he is able to relive the same day over and over. He's able to travel time, essentially. He's not a mind reader. When in the hell are some of these characters gonna tell him like their most private thoughts? How are they gonna be able to get that out of them? That really didn't make that much sense, but the rest of the science behind this movie is sound. Even if that science is pretty much made up, especially with the aliens. They're not going to waste time saying, oh, they came from this planet, and in fact, there's a scene where people are theorizing why the aliens are here, and then somebody just says, does it matter? They're destroying shit, so it doesn't really matter, we gotta destroy them. So that's essentially the focus of the movie. Let's not spend any time on why these aliens are here, and let's just learn how they move around and how they fight, so that then we can fight back. And that's what the movie relies on, and I love that. And lucky for us, we got two lead actors who really do carry the science fiction and make it believable. Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt lead this movie, and they're great together. They got good chemistry, and they really sold their parts. And I gotta give some props to Tom Cruise, because his character was actually written in a way that's very unconventional for Tom Cruise. The way his character starts off was different than what I had imagined him, and when I saw that, I'm like, wow, this is really different, and I commend Tom Cruise for tackling this type of character. It's different than what he usually plays. Now, granted, this character then becomes the character that Tom Cruise usually plays in these kinds of genre movies by the movie's end, especially another movie that he starred in that also deals with aliens. I'm not going to say what it is, and you guys probably guessed what it is by now, but he becomes that character essentially, down to the point where he's doing things that he did in that other movie. I'm like, is it in his contract where he writes it down that, oh, I have to do this in every movie? But hey, the one thing that he doesn't do in this movie is run like he usually does. He's got that mech suit holding him back, so to see him walk around, he's literally going and speaking of the way that he was walking at the beginning of this movie with that mech suit on, this movie has an awful lot of humor in it, and the majority of the humor in this movie works, especially when they utilize the factor of him being able to travel back in time whenever he dies to their advantage to deliver some really good moments, especially one that just made everybody in the theater laugh out loud, and that was one of the best moments. But I also like it that the movie never takes itself too seriously and retains that fun factor that was giving everybody, including myself, a really good time in the theater. Granted, I do say mostly because there were certain parts where the humor didn't click so much, especially when that humor relied on some of the side characters that Tom Cruise's character gets paired up with, where you got all these different type of characters within J Squad, I believe it was called, and they're just caricatures. They're people that you usually see in a Michael Bay movie. In fact, one has a very Michael Bay-esque shot of his ass, okay, and I'm like, wow, there they go, trying to be Michael Bay once again. But fortunately, it's almost like they're making the movie in real time, and when they noticed that we were not getting a laugh out of that one shot, they were like, okay, we're not going to do any more humor like that. And fortunately, that's how it is for the remainder of the movie. But I never really hated those characters or even disliked them. In fact, I didn't mind them being on screen, but because of the fact that this movie gets done over and over because of the fact that he's reliving the same day, you never really care for them whatsoever. And I like Brendan Gleeson, but when it comes to him being in these genre movies, it's almost like he doesn't really want to be there. Every time that he plays a character in a movie that deals with either science fiction or action or something like that, he's always got that same look on his face like, yeah, you know, let's get this over with. That was a terrible Scottish accent. I don't know if he's Irish or Scottish. I think he's Irish or Scottish. It's one of those two. But you know who's definitely having fun on the set is Bill Paxton, who just chews up the scenery in a great way, because there's a good way and a bad way to chew up scenery in a movie when it comes to an actor's performance, and it's definitely the former with Bill Paxton in this movie, because he was you can easily tell that he was having fun playing that character in this movie, and in response to that, I was having fun watching him having fun playing this role. And if a science fiction movie has to be fun, then you gotta include some really badass action sequences. And trust me, an awful lot of sequences in this movie are awesome, especially when they're utilizing the mech suits, and they got these swords, they got these guns that come out of the shoulders, and you got the guns here on the forearms, and they just look badass. There's a part of me that wishes that they would have come up with an extra gadget that comes out of nowhere and have that really cool badass moment where you're just like, oh, he just did that, and that doesn't really happen in the movie. But I was satisfied with what we got in terms of action. There's a part of me that wishes that they would have stabilized the camera a little bit in certain parts, because it did get just a little too shaky camera, but we did manage to see the majority of the action nonetheless. The only major complaint that I would have about the movie would be the ending. Not only is it a bit predictable, because leading up to it, certain things happen, and when these things started to happen, I'm like, I think I know how it's gonna end because of this. I've watched enough movies to know that if things are getting this drastic, and you're dealing with time travel, yeah. And it's actually one of the few little issues that I had with Days of Future Past. But also because of the fact that it ends that way, it never explains how it ended that way. It ends kind of abruptly. It's almost like it felt like the movie was overstaying its welcome, and they're just like, okay, you know, movie's over, this happened, bye, end credits. I was left puzzled walking out of the theater, driving home. I'm like, how did that happen? It almost doesn't really make any sense. You could have easily explained it, but instead you just went for a happier ending, and that came at a cost of not fully explaining how it happened. I mean, throughout the movie, I was thinking to myself, because of the fact it has to deal with time travel, I was thinking, of how there were certain bits where, like I said, I wish they would have shown him doing certain things instead of just saying, "Oh yeah, I did that. Oh yeah, I did that. Oh yeah, I know this about you." But I overlooked it because I'm like, okay, that's time travel, so you could theorize it in different ways. But the one in the ending would probably be the only exception where I'm like, okay, this is so glaring that I cannot simply just push it to the side. I have to take this into consideration when it comes to my review and in consideration with how I feel about the movie. And up until that point, I was thinking to myself, man, this movie's so fun. It's got good humor, great action, some really good science fiction that I can get behind. And up until that point, I was thinking to myself, man, this might just be another 9 movie within a month from the last one. But it was because of this ending that I feel the need to hold myself back a little bit and give Edge of Tomorrow an 8 out of 10. I still recommend that you go see this movie in the theater. I wouldn't say pay extra for the 3D because even though there were certain shots where debris is flying towards the screen and I actually did kind of flinch, it didn't warrant for an overall price of 3D. So just catch it in a regular 2D, but do see it in the theater because it actually is that good. And if you do, will you go see it in a double feature with X-Men Days of Future Past? Because that would just melt your brain. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you guys thought of Edge of Tomorrow, and I'll see you guys later. Take care.